Stand by for action. Anything can happen in the next half hour.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, and welcome to another exciting show. Well, haven't we got a lineup for you tonight? We've got from the United Rothschild States of America, we have Shannon, who's in the State of Awareness, one of the smallest states in the United Rothschild States of America. We have John Hamer from Barbados.
The People's Republic of Barbados, Chris, please.
I'm sorry, comrade. I'm very sorry about that, comrade. And of course, myself from Fockham Hall, one of the smallest countries in the world. Well, first of all, before we start, you probably had a guess what we're going to talk about tonight. Well, Shannon and John. There's a little clue. Beep, 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 beep. And five. Gee. Right. Now, before I start, I'd like to give a call out. Thank you very much for Ken and Ron, and also Gillian, who's been sending me a lot of information. Thank you very much. And this is for our English audience, sorry, British audience, not just English. The NHS apparently are going to sell private medical information to outside private organisations. And you can actually opt out of this, but they make it very, very difficult for you to opt out. So thanks to Gillian, she is actually, when I say difficult, you can't find it on their website. It's near impossible. And so if you want to opt out, instead of spending hours and hours and hours going around in ever-decreasing circles on their website, not finding it, Gillian has done all the footwork. Go on to fockhamhallradio.com and you will find a link which you can download the forms and tell them to shove their opt-out where the sun doesn't shine, or words to that effect. Anyway, on with the show. So over to you, John, first of all.
Thank you very much, Chris. Hi, everybody. Good to be here once again on the same time, same channel. So we are going to be talking about EMR, which is an acronym for electromagnetic radiation, he said very tentatively. Okay, but I think so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to speak for a few minutes first of all, but really this is going to be the Shannon show, or in fact the Tweety Pie show. So I'm going to hand over to Tweety Pie very shortly, but Shannon is going to, Shannon is going to be the main speaker tonight with rude interruptions from myself and Chris probably, but we are going to let Shannon do the bulk of it because she is an absolute world authority on this stuff, and you'll find out why soon enough. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to just talk a little bit about that acronym that I just mentioned, EMR, about its significance in our lives, and a little bit about the history of it. Because electricity in all its different forms and frequencies are absolutely not good for the human body in any quantity. We're all electrical beings, and there's no doubt that electromagnetic fields generated by all electrical devices affect all of our cells, which of course, as everyone knows, are also driven by electricity. But over the last kind of 170, 180 years that electricity has been around, our bodies have had to adjust to an ever-increasing assault on them by this kind of radiation. And I believe that when humans were first exposed, that even small amounts that they were initially kind of having to deal with were having just as serious an effect on the human body then as the huge amounts that we receive daily today. But it's just that we've gradually become used to it, and our bodies have learned to tolerate it as time has gone on. But even so, having said that, that's not a good thing. I'm not saying that, our bodies learn to tolerate it, so, that isn't that good. Not a good thing at all. And serious impartial studies are an absolute rarity, so we never really find out from the mainstream exactly how badly we're being affected. We're all constantly and permanently surrounded by electricity and electronic fields of various strengths. Some power lines that crisscross the country are, up to 1 million volts, and the electromagnetic fields that they produce are bathing us all, no matter where we are, in radiated EMR energy. And of course, this means that our body cells are given no rest whatsoever, and they're having to cope with this constant assault on us. And I think that both we and our bodies have forgotten what life was like before this dire situation came to pass. But let me just talk a little bit about the early days of electricity. In those early days, it began with wired telegraph systems, and only one wire was used, and it was the ground itself that was used as the earth to complete the electrical circuit, hence the term earthing or grounding, as some people call it. But unfortunately, what that meant was that it was the ground itself through which some of the electrical current passed, and of necessity along other undefined pathways too, because making the electricity run into the ground, there's no control over where it goes, so it actually affects a very wide area under the ground. We don't actually feel it necessarily, but it does pollute the ground with the MR. Okay, but it soon became very clear that those who were working in close proximity with the early primitive electrical devices and their currents were being negatively affected, and their health was suffering terribly in many, many respects. For example, as early as 1858, Charles Dickens was taken on a conducted tour of St. Luke's Lunatic Asylum in London, and he wrote, and I quote, "We passed a deaf and dumb man now afflicted with incurable madness," and he then asked his host what employment the man had been involved in during his working days, and the reply was, he was employed in the transmission of electric telegraph messages, Mr. Dickens. And also, an anonymous telegraphist wrote in 1905, again I quote, "Our nerves are shattered and the feeling of vigorous health has given way to a morbid weakness, a mental depression, a leaden exhaustion. Hanging always between sickness and health, we are no longer whole, but only half men. As youths, we are already worn out old men for whom life has become a burden. Our strength permanently sapped, our senses, our memories dulled, and our impressionability curtailed. Has the release of electrical power from its slumber created a danger for the health of the entire human race?" I mean, there's obviously little doubt that even then, in 1905, that this guy and his colleagues knew precisely what the cause of their problems were. I mean, even Nikola Tesla, the guy who was kind of instrumental in the early days of electricity, he suffered from a very severe electrical sensitivity, which probably was brought about by his frequent close contact with all the electrical currents. So yeah, it's like it's not. As I said, it's not that the amount of exposure specifically that is the issue, because as I said, when humans were first exposed, even those small amounts were having just as serious an effect on us as the huge amounts we receive daily today. But it's just that we've gradually become used to it. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that certain, shall we say, maladies, certain things that affected the human race over the time, over the decades, such as, for example, that outbreak in 1918, which I'm not going to mention by name, is very strongly suspected to have been caused by the advent of much greater electrical, shall we say, interference with our bodies due to things moving on very quickly in that field because of World War I, for example. So it wasn't solely that, but it's now thought to be a very important factor in that. So, as I say, just to re-emphasize, as time has gone on, our bodies have become more and more used to it, which is not a good thing. And the amounts that we're receiving now on a daily basis are absolutely critical. And this is where I want to introduce Shannon now, because she's got a very very interesting story to tell on a personal level, and also as a result of her personal experiences. She's very, very knowledgeable on this topic. So I'd like to hand over to Shannon now, if I may.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Chris. And just want to say that I'm more comfortable taking over a show when I'm interrupting rather when I'm told that I'm going to be the star.
Okay.
So.
Well, it's all right. We'll do the interruption.
Okay. Yeah. So first, I want to say you mentioned ground current, and that's really interesting because I don't know if you know this or anybody knows this over there, but in the U.S. we still use the ground as a return for the electrical utility companies. So this isn't done in like the rest of the world. Like literally, the rest of the world does not use the ground for the return. There should be a wire, which is what everybody else does. And subsequently, our ground is completely polluted with EMR. This is, they're seeing this affecting livestock, making them sick. This can make rural areas, when you think you're getting away from this stuff, not so great if there's huge high tension power lines around. So often people think they're getting away from it. They get out of the city and then they're finding they're still experiencing symptoms and they're not really sure why. And this is one of the cues to that. And actually, some people who've had sickness from this have gone abroad and felt a lot better and couldn't put their finger on why, because they feel like, well, they're still getting all these other exposures, right? So that can be the key to that in some cases. Anyway, but I just wanted to mention that before I forgot. Yeah, so my story, let's see, it was 2014 now, was when I really started having severe symptoms. But like John said, electricity, and I want to make a distinction right now that there's natural, electromagnetic fields, and then there's man-made. And like most things man-made, it's not, to say, we like to say that it's the same. We have this graph. If you can look this up, the electromagnetic spectrum, you'll see where all these things fall in the spectrum. And so what happens is we're told, well, this is, this energy that we're being exposed to is close to this one in nature and therefore similar or the same. And it's not the same because when we're talking about artificial, I'll get into that a little bit more later, but there's a distinct difference between artificial and man-made man-made and natural radiation and how it impacts our biology. Because it has been altered, we've altered it. So that's what the changes we've made when we're using these frequencies makes all the difference. And that has to do with the pulsation. But anyway, I don't want to get into that just yet. But what I wanted to say about that is that, our world is very altered, as John was saying, from what it was due to all this proliferation of all this technology. And, we have, in some ways, maybe we've adapted, but I feel that we're more just used to a lower level of well-being. And so, you can't miss what you've never had, right? And our standard for wellness and health has just dropped dramatically. So, we're seeing all these illnesses that are just considered, that are chronic, that just everybody has. So now that they're normal, that's like that's okay. You go to doctors and they're like, they find out you have diabetes when you're in your 20s or heart condition or anxiety or depression or like a long list of things. And it's like, oh, well, that's just normal. Everybody has it. So, you're fine. You're actually healthy. I have friends consider themselves healthy who are on a number of prescription medications for a number of chronic illnesses. And this is normal now. So, but what I want to say, Arthur Firstenberg is the author of an excellent book called The Invisible Rainbow. And what he's referring to when he's saying invisible rainbow is that, we're talking about frequencies that are not visible to the human eye. So we're not talking about the visible spectrum of light, but it is a light spectrum. And he mentions, he goes into the history, like John was just talking about, of our exposures and the industry, and people were getting very ill from like very small amounts of man-made electromagnetic, exposures. So, but he mentioned the flu, and the flu didn't exist prior to these exposures, and it's been with us ever since in some form or another and hasn't gone away. And, you know, what used to be seasonal is now becoming more of a year-round thing. And this has so much to do with our increased exposures because, you know, when you get sunlight in the summer, you get less blue light. So you can say that these artificial light exposures are, you know, we call them blue light often, and you can kind of see that blue light when you're looking at a screen. But it's also like a lot of things are considered blue light still that you don't see, because that's the best way to describe kind of where they fall in the spectrum, because you can kind of equate it to something like midday lights. And so already you're disrupting your circadian rhythms by getting this like noonday light exposure all the time at night and everything else. But my point is that more and more we're exposed to screens and other devices which are, you know, exposing us to this kind of light all the time, all year. So these sicknesses that used to be more prevalent in the winter when we'd be indoors more and have less sunlight and more blue light exposure are now more chronic and, you know, visiting us throughout the whole year. So, yeah, but I was going to say, so just real quickly about my background, John was alluding to, in 2014, I started to have problems using my my devices. You know, that the non-wired devices, the one that most everybody uses. And I like this acronym, you know, I'm going to say it now. I don't want to say it too much, but SMART, you know, so we can call it intelligent instead if we want. Calling our devices, calling these technologies intelligent in the first place is kind of like a way to intimidate us and to keep us from questioning them. Because already we are saying, like, you know, how dare you question something that's intelligent? Right. So this is more intelligent than you are, you know, so people don't dare question it. But I had this intelligent phone and I had been kind of a holdout just because I was cheap. I didn't want to pay so much for it. And so I didn't have one, of those that Chris is holding up. I had the old school kind and I didn't use it that much. I mean, I had a little bit of awareness of like possible dangers. I had heard about that in the 90s. And for those of you who remember and were around in the 90s, when the first networks were going up, there were protests all over. In fact, I remember I was in Ireland at the time when they were protesting it. The Irish people actually did not want these networks installed. And they fought and fought and fought, but obviously they lost. And a few years later, I went back and I was just like horrified. I saw these lolly sticks all over the place, as Chris was calling them earlier. But antenna, I'll say antenna now, but as you know, so lolly sticks, you know, all over the landscape. And what was really upsetting to me is I noticed that they were in schoolyards and in hospitals. Like the first place they put them in Ireland was like right next to the school and right next to the hospital. And I was like, well, why are they choosing those places? That's where they're putting these, you know. And I knew that you weren't supposed to be close to them.
Sorry, Shannon.
What's that?
I didn't mean to. I said they're doing that
No, go ahead.
with the latest incarnation as well, with the old high five, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. The high five is well, yeah, that's going everywhere. That I'll get into that. But in the early days of this, there were just these very big ones, and you know, they seem to put them right by the children and the sick and the weak, you know, the young and the sick. And I at least knew that you shouldn't be very close to them. You know, I thought I knew like, well, within so many feet, it's really dangerous. And it seemed like everybody knew that. And so I thought, well, I knew you weren't supposed to put the phone to your head. You know, we used to have antenna that were external, so you could at least direct that away from your brain. But now all the new so-called, you know, intelligent devices have internal antenna, and they have multiple internal antenna. And people are holding these next to their brains, which are electrical, you know, most definitely get affected by these currents. And then their hearts and other parts of their bodies that, you know, having a huge impact on our health in all kinds of ways. I just saw one of the comments here from Peter says the SMART device refers not to intelligent, but something that smarts, i.e. hurts, is painful. Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. I also, for those of you who want to look this up, the military has used that acronym for all kinds of things. They have like at least a dozen or more uses of that acronym. And I know one of them stood for surveillance something or other, you know, so you can guess like what they're really saying there with the surveillance part. Yeah, so back to the story. Right. So I had some awareness. I was a little bit cautious. I noticed I didn't really like holding it to my head. I would, I tried not to take too many calls on it. I had a landline. I, did that. But I did notice a heating effect behind my ear, in the early days of using it. And so I was always a little cautious. But I didn't really have severe effects that I noticed until 2014. And that followed having the intelligent electric meters installed on the apartment building I was in. And they were right under my apartment. There were a few of them. And I noticed firstly that my garden I had on the balcony stopped thriving and all my plants start dying. And I just finally gave up. I had had a garden there for years and years. And my cat used to like to lie there and he wouldn't lie out there anymore. And I just had no idea. I didn't even know they had installed them. I hadn't had any notice. I mean, I may have had notice in fine print somewhere, but I didn't see it. And I didn't know about them. So it wasn't until I actually got the intelligent phone and then started having worse symptoms increasingly and found out about, and my cat got sick first of all too, in a really strange way. And he had detached retina all of a sudden. I mean, he was elderly, but he was in good health up to that point. And then another one just mysteriously, suddenly his retina detached and he was in a lot of pain and went to the vet. And then the next one detached and he lost a lot of his vision. And then a friend of mine said, that those meters, there's all these reports of pets getting, having detached retinas from these meters and these other things. And I said, wow, so I start looking into that. But I didn't really have symptoms for a while yet. And it wasn't until I had a lot of exposure on a very long flight. It's 30 hours of being in planes and traveling that really did me in, I think, and kind of like pushed me over the edge, I think, with the reactivity. But I can just say real quickly, my symptoms ranged from migraines were the biggest one, headaches, migraines, heart arrhythmia, cognitive dysfunction. Then I had insomnia was really bad. That was one of the worst. But I had this electrical, what I really noticed when I really just knew what it was from was when I was holding my device and it just, sending text messages was sending these electrical pulses through my hand and my arms and it would stay in my arm for some time after. And it was really bothering me. And I thought, this isn't right. So I started researching it a bit more, finding out there were just literally millions of people in the world dealing with this. And they're calling it a sensitivity. They call it a hypersensitivity now. There's you might see electrical sensitivity, electromagnetic sensitivity is the official diagnosis medically. So EMS, but commonly it's called EHS, and which is electrohypersensitivity, though I like to call it exploding head syndrome, which is how I felt and continue to feel when I'm around it. So I had this exploding head syndrome and found that there are just millions of people dealing with this. And, the speculation is just kind of like an overexposure where you become almost like allergically reactive. I mean, I know people who still have to hide away from it. Basically, now that I've hidden away for some years, as much as I can tolerate a little more at a time, but I still have the same kind of symptoms if I'm exposed. If I'm not exposed, I feel perfectly well. So this kind of, pushed me into this whole world of, having to learn about the technology, learn about the history, learn about the industry, because I had, once I start telling people, I mean, they all thought I was kind of crazy. I mean, nowadays when I tell people, I don't get your crazy look, because I think there's a growing awareness and a growing percentage of the population dealing with it to the point where at least people listen. But but back then, honestly, when I try to tell people, they just looked at me like I was insane. And so I started being more cautious about who I told, because it was hard enough to deal with it and a lot harder to have it not accepted and people look at you like it's a psychological problem, and then it's of course well, you're not a scientist, so, I can't speak of things, I guess, unless I'm a scientist. And so I'm a canary today because I'm Tweety, because there's this, I don't know if you've all heard about the canary in the coal mine, but that's the analogy used a lot for people like me, because in the 1900s in this country, at least, I don't know if they did it over there, but the coal miners would take, you did? Okay. yeah, the coal miners used to take canaries into the mines with them, because the canaries require so much of a higher level of oxygen than humans, that I guess the canary in particular, out of other birds, I mean birds in general do, but they found if they took a canary in a cage, if the canary, I guess the canary would sing, or if it stopped singing or fell off its perch, they knew that the oxygen levels had declined, right? The oxygen levels had dropped to a dangerous level, and they would get the hell out of there. So the canaries served as a warning, and this is where I come in, and people like me, is that, people who are more sensitive to these changes in the environment, it's not just about us being affected. I mean, a lot of people would like to dismiss it, and they might feel bad for me, acknowledge that I have this problem, whether or not they think it's psychological, even if they believe it's physical, they don't think it affects them. It's just like, oh, well, she has it. Lucky me, I don't have it. Instead of understanding that, being more sensitive, I'm understanding what's affecting me. A lot of these people are having some of the same symptoms I have, and not understanding what's coming from. So, I mean, we're all, humans. Nobody's a superhuman. I know that they're pushing to try to make us into them. That's the promise anyway of the transformations that are being discussed. But yeah, we're all human. We're all electric, like John was saying, we're all electromagnetic beings. The whole universe, everything in the world and in this life is electrical in nature of some kind. It's all frequency based and energy based. So, I mean, I'm not, so I'm here to warn you, basically. I'm saying that, like, this is happening, and that people need to get out of the mine. Yeah. So do we want to have a little look at the chat comments at all for a minute?
I could make a few
I'll catch my breath here.
I could make a few comments here. I'll get the feedback here. I don't know what's happening, but I'm getting a sort of a feedback. I don't know if anybody can you hear me, but
okay now.
Okay, right. What it is that I think it's my microphone. I have not got a micro oven, and I will not use a micro oven. I won't mention the full name, say microwave oven, and I never have used one. I'm totally against it, and I don't think it's. I think they are extremely dangerous. But the other couple of things is that in Cornwall, here in Great Britain, there's radon gas, which comes from the rocks, which is a sort of a natural radiation that comes up. And it never really affected people years ago, because they had the sort of houses that it just goes straight through and out the roof, and there it is. But since they've been building modern houses, which they're more airtight, people have been going down with cancers and things, and they have to have a special foundation put in to stop the radon coming through. But another point, I won't go on. My grandfather, sadly died before I was born, was totally blind. And he had incredible sense of hearing, and to a point that is almost superhuman. And he was around when the radio was first starting in the 1920s, and my dad was very, very young. And his dad used to listen to the radio interviews and said, a couple of weeks' time, he'll be replaced. His voice is going because of the electricity in the microphones. And sure enough, he was right. Anyway, just a little thought that is. Now, we've got some really interesting items in chat. First of all, we've got Paul Green. Hello, Paul. Have worked on microwave transmission systems. There are health issues, but my biggest worry is how the latest technology will be used to control, spy on us.
Well, that is a worry.
Interesting.
That is a worry, but with respect, Paul, I don't think it's half as big a worry as what the effect of the M-wave transmission systems are doing to our bodies. It's we're talking about health here versus freedom, and I think all of us. It's a debatable point. I think that health is far more important in many senses, although obviously you don't want to lose.
But I do agree. I mean, I agree that that's part of the I think that's the part of the point, though, of the high five is definitely what he's saying, though. The surveillance aspect is enormous with that, and that's a big, primary reason this is rolling out. So, yeah, I agree. both points are really important.
Well, Rob Brandon says people knew electric was dangerous before we tamed it. Getting hit by lightning was our first encounter. That's right. The Aborigines did not know how to make fire, and they had what was called a fire stick, which came from a bolt of lightning which hit the trees and caught them alight. But anyway, now Peter, hello Pete. Since going fourth generation many years ago, I have had a constant bombardment of headaches and eye strain and memory concentration problems. Yes, and I'll tell you what I find, I get stressed out. If I look at a smartphone for any length of time, I feel really, it heightens my blood pressure. I feel giddy. It really does. I find it quite upsetting. And there's Sean Hamer, no relation, I hasten to add, to John. Hello Sean, it's worth checking out John. Now this is interesting. John LeBon's website and having a look at his Tesla hoax information. I'm learning something there, Sean. And he goes on to say, now this is a shock, a surprise, but one that's a very interesting surprise. Tesla himself being the hoax, i.e. invented character. Now,
I believe it.
Everyone,
I have suspicions myself along those lines. Yeah.
Really? 'Cause I mean, I know that Einstein was a hoax, but that is thank you, Sean. This is what this program's about. This is what these shows are about. That is pushing our knowledge coming out. It's fantastic. Thanks, Sean. That's brilliant. Thank you. And everybody else, of course. Thank you very much. Peter, SMART device refers not to intelligent, but something that smarts, i.e. hurts, is painful. You're spot on there. Oh yeah, we mentioned this earlier. It really is all the same. All in the name. Sorry, sneaky sod. Yes. And now we've got Louise Wilcox. Hello, Louise. We've got my device certainly ain't smart. It didn't give me a reminder today. I'm like, oh, it's lines for you then.
Did you forget to wind it up, Louise?
Yeah. Now it's Peter. Hiya, Louise. Mine certainly ain't smart either. I downgraded to an old brick early this year. Worst thing is though, I get worse headaches with the brick than the previous device. And then we've got hello, Peter. Right, here we go. And then we've got Peter. Found a way. Louis, we've got a good way forward. Unfortunately, I need one to keep in touch with people. Now that's interesting because I've got a smartphone that I use at home, but I don't. If I take it out, I haven't got a contract with it, and I'll just sort of nobble at supermarkets, which is quite legal. You can log into other people's Wi-Fi. Legally, I have hastened to add. Louise has said, even those landlines now do it all through the internet, unless you tell them not to with yours. And there's Angela Davis. Hi, everyone. And there we've got, where are we? There we go. Oops. Sean, carrier pigeons don't get the respect they deserve. Yes. And I'll tell you something other that's interesting. Is that troops and people that are outside all the time don't go down with colds and FLU. And my father said throughout the 6 years of war, not one person, and remember, they were outside all the time, or most of the time, they didn't go down with the colds and FLU was unheard of.
That kind of backs up, sorry, Chris, to interrupt, that kind of backs up the what we were going to talk about at some point, but probably not on this channel. And that is the opposite of germ theory. That kind of backs that up, doesn't it?
Well, yes, but if I just round off, I just
sorry.
No. People to come here to hear yourselves. What I was going to say is, I had a girlfriend who was an anthropologist, and she noted there was two tribes, one in the Amazon, one in Africa, and they lived you get the feeling that they don't live very long, but they lived to a ripe old age. And it was not uncommon for them to live to over 100. And their life was free of electricity, stress, and all the things we've got. I mean, I'm not saying we should all go back to living in mud huts and caves, but doesn't that make you think? They were free of all the stuff we've got, and they lived to well over 100. Because we're led to believe a lot of these tribes, yes, they do live short lives, but some of them live long lives. So over to you, either John or Shannon.
Well, I can continue.
Yeah. Please continue,
Yeah. So yeah. Right. So actually, I haven't had a phone or any kind of intelligent devices ever since. And I've managed. I've had to alter my life in many drastic ways. I know a lot of people say, "Well, I couldn't do it," and I would have said the same thing until I had to do it. I mean, it was either be tortured constantly or make a change. So, I'm still having to deal with this because it encroaches all over, and this is why I'm in a very remote location with poor internet connection. But honestly, it's because I have to use satellite, which is a compromise for me. I mean, satellite's not great. I don't want to be using it, but I can use a long Ethernet cable from it and avoid a lot of that exposure and have it off when I'm not using it. But, fiber optics cable, we can have very high speeds with this. And it's proven that it can be like 10,000 times faster if we wanted to use it that way than any of the unwired connections we have and the ones that we're coming into now. I mean, the whole push for this high five is that, for faster connection. And the thing is, we could have that already and it would be secure. So why don't we keep developing that system? In fact, there's a lawsuit against the FCC because they have misappropriated funds that were given to them years ago in order to, develop fiber optics specifically, cable, not non-wired infrastructure. So they've been using it for non-wired. I mean, all the non-wired, I'm going to keep saying, uses fiber optics. It's that last, mile or so where they don't. And why? It's like that all they needed to do was put a little bit more cable in there, right? I mean, of course, there's areas far away from this cable fiber optic systems, which you could argue, well, yes, we could project, we can broadcast this much farther and there's these benefits. But I mean, honestly, do we need to be connected all the time? People need to reassess what a need is. We're redefining needs. And a lot of these things are just not necessary. And I can testify to that because I've been able to manage and live my life like we all used to without it and without having it constantly in my life. And it's quite liberating. When I first was facing this problem and I realized I had to give up my device, which even the word device, is divisive, right? It's an interesting word. But I had this device that I was holding on to for a while. I thought, well, I'll minimize it. I'll just text. I was texting people to say, please stop texting me and just email me. And then they texted me back, okay. And I just was like, this isn't working, right? Like people wouldn't understand. So as soon as I stopped using it at all, I remember thinking I was not somebody who was addicted to it. And I remember being at a traffic light and just putting my hand out to the seat next to me in this kind of habitual grab for something that wasn't there to check text messages that weren't there. I hadn't realized I'd become so habituated to this constant distraction, constantly with me and constantly distracting me. So it's actually been really liberating. It was really felt devastating and still is in some ways, but it's been also liberating because I've been free to live my life in a way that a lot of people probably would prefer and maybe long to. And because we're losing so much with this push to be constantly so-called connected, and we're being connected through screens in these artificial ways. And of course, in this last year, we would never have been able to experience life this way and under these circumstances. People would have protested had we not already adapted our lives so much to living through screens. My point being that, to say that we can stay at home now and it's not a problem because we have screens and we could connect with the world through the screens, right? I mean, if we were more accustomed to being outside more, I mean, there would be more protests. But the fact that, we've already the system already had to be in place in order to bring about some other changes we've been seeing in societies this last year. I mean, that would never have happened. It would never have gone down even just 5 years ago. Like, you had to get the system in place for people, and people's lives changed dramatically in a way that they could accept this new prison, this new level of imprisonment. They're telling us it's not imprisonment. And I think the push is to keep us like indoors and in front of screens, and to the point where, you know, we'll be living life as avatars, which is something the Japanese government has actually said. They're predicting that like 50% of their people or more by 2050 are going to be living as avatars. They're preparing for that future. So, I mean, this is where we're going. This high five isn't about just faster connectivity. I mean, what they're saying is it's about involving things in our web now, right? The web of things. And so this means that all man-made things will also be trackable and be part of this system. And, you know, and prior to this last year, I don't think that most people were that interested in that. I mean, who cares about a remote controlled toaster, or, you know, I mean, all this like trying to sell us on remote controlled everything. I don't think there was a lot of interest, but, you know, we had this crisis now, and a big excuse to push this new technology, because of course now we need to contact trace, or we need to, you know, track everything because of the public health concern, which is really ironic to me, because the main public health threat we're facing is the very technology that's being used to supposedly, you know, help us. Yeah, so it is a definitely control grid, but it's about, like, I see it as a kind of technocratic wet dream, if you will. I don't know if you know much about technocracy, but their stated goals, and this is back in the 1930s, was to completely like track and control every aspect of society, everything, every plant, animal, person, goods. You know, it's all resource-based economy in terms of controlling every aspect of every resource. And this is what we're seeing with these like intelligent cities, as they're calling them, is this you know, push to track and trace everything, and to just this like micromanaging our world is what I'm hearing talk of. The jab, you know, getting the jab and having something in it that will trace us and track us. And I think we're getting primed for that, because humans are going to be the main thing in this web of things. I mean, that's what I think we're gearing up for. And people need to understand that's what's happening, I think. Anyway, I got kind of sidetracked there, but I wanted to go back to this, my experience with this condition, my exploding head syndrome, because I like to also use the slowly boiled frog analogy. I think is really fitting. And so the slowly boiled frog is where, you know, you take frog. If you were going to cook a frog or several frogs, you put them in a pot, and and they won't leave the pot if you just slowly heat the water up, so that they don't notice with each change in the temperature that it's getting hotter and hotter until they die because it's so hot. So if it heats up right away, the frogs would jump out of the pot. And I use this analogy because this is what the whole world is experiencing right now. Like John was saying initially when we started the show, that, you know, we've sort of gotten used to this feeling, or maybe not feeling so good anymore. But, you know, honestly, this high five, this new, you know, generation, as they're calling it, isn't really new. I mean, it was developed a long time ago. All these generations were developed a long time ago. Why, if they had this already, if they already had this technology, why not just throw it at us right away? And the reason they didn't throw it at us right away, and they went in increments, was to get us used to the heating up, right? So the first step is like, okay, some people, and each time a new one is introduced, and okay, let's put it this way. Each time, like, the heat is turned up a little bit hotter, some percentage of the population is going to feel that heat. And those are the more sensitive ones, right? And they're going to feel sick. They're going to get sick. So they're just cranking it up again. That's what this next step is. And so if they'd done it all right away, we'd all feel it, and there's no way anybody would have gone along with it, right? So we're all frogs in the pot. And I think it's funny that the canaries, like me, are the frogs that are jumping out of the pot. We're trying to get away from it. And, you know, I kind of have this idea in my mind of this mad scientist, like, studying this phenomena of the frogs that are jumping out of the pot, that's slowly, gradually cooking them. And, you know, saying, what is this? Why is this frog jumping out of the pot? Something must be wrong with this frog. This frog must have a disorder. We must check and see what is wrong with the frog. And, you know, and so we go through all this, like, analyzing, and, you know, because this is what me and so many like me, like, well, what's wrong with us? Which we sort of see it maybe the wrong way. There's nothing wrong with us. We're just the frogs jumping out. We're trying to tell people the water's getting really hot. And it is heating. I mean, this stuff it has a heating effect. And you've got all these people talking about, you know, global heating, yet they heat the ionosphere with the instrument, I'll say the harp that angels do not play, if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they're heating, they actually emit, they're using it to heat the ionosphere, right? And yet they're saying, oh, greenhouse gas, we have to stop, you know, driving our cars, and, like, you know, the little people have to stop burning fuels, and they're heating the ionosphere on purpose for experimental purposes. And then, you know, when we've got these low orbit, you know, for the high five, the low orbit, I don't know if I can say satellite, but, you know, orbs or whatever you have it. The orbs.
Sorry, I want to let you finish, but I just wanted to. Just want to say something a little bit about these satellites when you finished your little bit now.
Oh, okay. Sure, yeah.
You also got pointing chat as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, a lot in chat. So anyway, that's also, you know, contributing to this. I mean, if we want to take the whole world to this next level, and of the temperature being turned up, and you also want to talk about not heating up the planet, you know, I mean, it's because it's interesting to me that they're constantly saying that the intelligent grid is the way to go for combating, you know, so-called climate change and global warming, yet that in and of itself is like adding to the temperature rising, right? I mean, why would you use radiation, you know, that's known to heat, in trying to combat heating? But of course, they're probably just going to tell us it's cooling now, so we need to heat it up. It's getting cold, right? Anyway, John was going to say something, and then Chris, if you want to go to chat, that would be great.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chris, and then I'll let you go to chat. Yeah, Shannon, just talking about satellites. Last week when you were here, we did the.
Right.
No, it was a week before when we did Flat Earth. We talked about a documentary, and people kindly put a link for it because I'd watched it the previous week, and it's a new documentary on Flat Earth, and it's called Level. And on that documentary, there may be people watching and listening now who watched that, but it was very interesting because it actually showed footage of them launching satellites. And no, they don't launch them with rockets; they launch them with balloons. Most of these satellites are actually floating on huge helium balloons, and there's actually footage of it happening. And they're launching them from Antarctica as well, so that nobody knows what's going on. But yeah, I would recommend that documentary for anybody who wants to watch it. It's called Level, and it's definitely on BitChute. It is on YouTube, but hard to find. Well, it was last time I looked. Okay. And definitely worth watching.
Yeah, I know that the satellite issue is an issue when it comes to that model, and you know, people wonder, well, what's really going on, and what is it? You know, where are they? What if we start asking those questions? You know, and there's that anomaly of people's satellite dishes pointing to the ground and yet still functioning. You know, which has caused a lot of questions to come up about that, like about how the systems actually work. Yeah, I'd like to learn more about that. I mean, of course, we're. It is a worry that, you know, they're talking about I mean, just to put this in perspective, up until, you know, last year, there were a total of like 2,000 satellites, supposedly, right, for communications. And the proposal is for 60,000, right, or more. 60,000 more. And like when the first ones were allegedly launched, right, there was like an increase in a lot of symptoms. Percentage of the population was having all these problems, and it seemed to be linked to this new communication system. So yeah, what's actually going on there is an interesting question, because I hate to be I try to I feel that on one hand, with the high five, there's this idea of like a possible extinction event affect humans. Of course, it affects all levels of life, and more so insects, actually, which would then have this ripple effect, and of course affect us as well, affect the food production chain, because they're saying, oh, it only penetrates through the skin and only affects water molecules. Well, we're made of water. The whole atmosphere is water, that we have to breathe oxygen. It affects oxygen molecules. So that's the ludicrous statement, besides the fact that our eyes are, at skin level. And so is the thyroid is very like close to that. So you've got these, anyway, there's a whole, I can get into that technically too, what that does, but it's like, there's this kind of thought processes that is like, if this happens and it's everywhere, that we're just screwed, and it's like annihilation event. And I also feel like that we have to be careful, because that could be a fear porn, as John likes to say, or like a fear, another way to frighten us, kind of like the Cold War and the nuclear weapons idea, right? Is it something that can, does it really have that potential? I don't know. I like to think that man doesn't really have the potential to wipe out all life, and that, maybe we're led to believe that, like, that man can play God, but hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully this can't happen. But anyway, yeah, but Chris, I think you wanted to.
Okay. Well, this is absolutely fascinating. Hang on, we go. Here we go. Hang on. Now, we've got Sean Hamer, and this is interesting. There's also apparent evidence that TV was originally being developed to contact the other side. And Peter has come in with saying, Sean Hamer, something to do with white noise. Now, that sounds like something for another program, because off air, John and I were talking about demons and things from other levels and whatever. But that is a very interesting point, what's said there. And we've got the New World Order is real. Hello, ladies. I'm still taking the tablets, but I'm still Mal. Sorry I'm late. YouTube wasn't letting me see the chat. Oh, dear. And then Peter's come through with, funny, isn't it, Shannon? The more connected we become, the more isolated we are. No such thing as community anymore. Not here anyway. Well, there's fake communities that the government because they're all right community, but a community is something.
Actually, and can I just interject? Yeah.
Carry on.
Sorry. Yeah, I was going to interject that that's correct. In fact, I feel like they're kind of hijacking language. If you haven't noticed, they take all the words we use that used to mean one thing and kind of reappropriate them to mean something else related to technology in this new world they want us to live in. It's like, yeah, all these words now, like even friends, friends on social media, like friendship has taken on a whole new meaning. Community has taken on a whole new meaning. Even ecosystem, they're throwing out the word ecosystem to cover things for these grids. So, for high five, it's like it's a high five ecosystem. Since when is it ecological or really in any way natural? Even just down to saying Windows on your computer, or that your computer goes to sleep, or it's just sneakily like changing the way we view everything by taking over our language, so that everything that was once natural, part of the natural world, has been taken over by being part of this artificial world and artificial way of living.
Good point.
Yes, and I'm old enough to remember when they introduced plastic bags to save the trees, and now we're doing away with plastic bags.
That's funny.
But
wow.
We've got here, where is it? Sean Hamer again. Don't forget this is television, I believe he's talking about, was invented in the time of seance and spiritualism. That's right. Yes, and I actually worked in the building where the first television transmission was made from in Longacre. And yes, now where are we? Yeah, mind you, there we go. Sean Hamer says, television set is the name of a god. Television is the medium through which Satanism will be delivered to the masses. Anton LaVey. I mean, I'll tell you something. Sean and Pete are really getting me thinking tonight, and that is an eye opener. Tesla and television. That is not linked. Was it? It was Yogi Bear, wasn't it? No, sorry, it was Bear that devised the television. So they say. Yeah, at least we don't have the traffic all year round. I came from West London, so yeah, it's okay to empathise. Then we've got tell a vision, and you pick programs to watch. So now we've got an interesting one here. Paul Green. The reason I was not as worried about the health issue is because I have the knowledge to protect myself from it. Anyone can do this without too much hassle. In my ignorance, am I thinking about a Faraday cage or something like that? But in my ignorance, I'm sorry about that. Now it says here, Sean.
I want to say something about that when we're done. Yeah.
Certainly.
I could say something to that. Yeah. My first year dealing with this, I tried to stay in the city, and I tried to remediate. I spent thousands of dollars on protection devices. I literally slept in a Faraday cage. I could say that the cage helped. I stopped having insomnia, night sweats, and nightmares, but I also was tired all the time, because the problem with trying to mitigate in that way is that first of all, you block out the Earth's electromagnetic field called the Schumann resonance, which supports all life, and you really don't want to be away from that too long. But also the metal would pick up the low frequency EMF and create this kind of cage of another EMF that was it was fatiguing. I had a different kind of response to that. So it's really challenging trying to shield, because you tend to make something worse. It's very tricky, but I tried all the pendants. I tried the shungite and Schumann resonator devices. Personally, for me, being as sensitive as I am, nothing compared to just getting avoidance and getting away from it. Maybe I'm still open to it. I keep hearing about new things and ways to maybe change the frequency, somehow. But I do caution against putting a lot of trust and faith in something like that could just end up being a placebo, and have short-term effects or no effects. And then you may think you're protecting yourself, but end up with cancer or something, But I'm open to more ideas about it. But, yeah.
Have you actually had a case, I know in Great Britain here, of low frequency noise? There's a lot of it reported in the late 70s, about 79, 80. And I've actually experienced it. You're laying in bed, I hasten to add this was a few years ago, about 10 years ago, and there's this noise that if you put a recorder on, it wouldn't pick it up. And it's just sort of, it sounds like a piston engine aeroplane flying through low cloud, but it won't go. I don't know if people in the United States have experienced it, and it's called the hum. And I don't know whether it's anything to do with what we're talking about tonight.
I was going to say, I heard about the hum.
Not saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Anything about it, John? The hum?
Yeah, I've heard about the hum.
I've experienced it, yeah. It's just a kind of a background. It's kind of an indefinable background noise.
That's right. It's driven me mad.
You don't notice it first. So once you become aware of it, it does drive you mad. You become kind of hyper aware of it, and I don't know what it is really, but it's obviously something electrical. But I don't know.
I'll tell you. I know one possibility. I do know one possibility for that. It's called infrasound, which comes from the wind turbines. So wind turbines, one big reason to not use this ridiculous technology that does nothing for anybody. But it's it's supposed to be like somehow getting off of fossil fuels. But as John knows about this, it takes a lot of energy to power the things in the first place.
Yeah. More energy than they produce.
It hardly runs just off of wind. Exactly. To even like construct them. But it actually produces something called infrasound, which is a low frequency sound, EMF, that travels up to 15 miles away. And so a lot of people, if you're close enough to it, you can detect it like you were describing as a kind of hum, and it drives people crazy. And also, if you don't detect the hum, you may still have interference with your sleep and not know what it's from. This happened to me in Arizona. We were far away from the wireless grid, but there was something going on, and we found out there were wind turbines about 10 miles away. That was actually, because they'll travel, the infrasound will go, it's like radar, it'll go through the earth, it'll go through rocks and mountains, so you can't just block it. Like the thing about the higher frequencies, you can block them with earth, so that's a benefit there, but the lower frequencies can penetrate. So yeah, I bet the hum is to do with either, if it's not from turbines, it would be something military is my guess, to do with radar communications or something. Yeah.
The two things you see, when it happened in 1979, there weren't wind turbines around at that time. And when I picked it up around about 10 years ago, part of Hertfordshire where I live, there, as far as I know, there's within around, there's no wind turbines. There probably is, but not where I live. But what this was, the hum, I'll be very brief about it. I actually wrote an article about it. It went from Cambridge and it moved. And it moved down, and then it moved, and it sounded as if it's coming from the ground. And then it moved along, and it ended up in Canterbury, in Kent. And it moved across London, and people were plotting it. It's very strange. And most people thought it was an underground military tunnel that they were building. But it was a sort of a... But 10 years ago, I was laying in bed, and it always happened at night. And you're laying there, and you hear this sort of noise of, like, as I say, like an aircraft going through clouds. But we've got some interesting stuff in chat here, and we've got here Sean again. My word, he's certainly eating his spinach today, isn't he, Sean? Sean Hamer, the interference is that inference is that interference. I've got interference on the mind. Inference is that entities can gain access via devices. Again, this is immaterial for another show, I think. In this sense, something is as simple as a chalk pentagram is a device. Perhaps there is a little more going on at the movies than we see. Sean, I think you're giving me or giving us material for another show, because it's something I am particularly interested in, is evil entities. So that is something interesting. Now we've got here The Evil Eye. This is from Ralph Winter. The Unacceptable Face of Television by Guy Lyon. Playfair is a good deed. That's interesting. Now the one here, which is New World Order is real. There's something called, now I knew there's white noise. I didn't know about something else. There's something called black noise that even David Bowie was talking about in an interview. And a little pat on the back here. John Basing-Lone says, Shannon is absolutely correct. So a little pat on the back there, Shannon. And hello, we got the Urban Stealth Camper Van Man. Hello. Excellent artist, excellent website. So it's worth visiting. Oh, website, what am I talking about? YouTube. Go to YouTube, Urban Stealth Camper Van Man. Very interesting. Now, we got here, Peter, internet was always a trap. That's why they call it a World Wide Web. Now, that's an interesting one. Or net, to catch us, trap us. And we've got here, Chris, this is Peter. I get that a lot since they rolled out the latest generation here a few months back. Tinnitus perhaps caused by overload of frequencies. And then we've got Louise, which is Louise Wilcox, every night we hear that sound like aeroplanes. We've been hearing it for months. Starts around, that's right, 3 a.m. for hours. And my sister and brother-in-law, who I don't speak to, I hasten to add, about 15 years ago, they actually got local council officials in to listen to it, and it was driving them mad. And they live in another part of Hertfordshire, and it's a sort of a, ooh, it's just low power, and it's all around you. You can't say where it's coming from. It's just around you. You go out in the street, it's around you, and then suddenly it stops.
Wow.
Really weird. It's always at night.
Wow.
Very strange. Have you come across this?
I haven't, but is that still going on?
No, I haven't heard it.
Is this ongoing for you?
No, I have. I personally, it's
weird.
For 10 years, but people in chat are saying they're still hearing it. I mean, we've had one from Peter, and we've had one. Peter says, "I've just read it. He gets it a lot, and so does Louise Wilcox. I think it depends on what part of Britain you live in, or maybe the continent as well, because I think they picked it up on the continent as well. So it's very, very strange, you know. And we got here from New World Order as well. Black noise is the theory of low vibrations used to control people's thoughts. And also, well, you've also got the oldest
I
way
think,
which is the subliminal strip. That control people's thoughts, didn't it? Have you heard of the subliminal strip?
That's a good. No.
What that is?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I have heard of subliminal audio technology.
Yeah, they will put a few frames of, say, hamburgers into a film, and then for some unknown reason you fancy a hamburger because it's worked on your subconscious. Because you don't see the hamburger in the film, but your subconscious does. I'm just giving that as an example. It's supposed to be banned, but I've actually seen it, and they used it at the beginning of the Iraq War, the biggest did, where they showed a howitzer gun. They flashed it on the screen very quickly, and the way I found it, as I was videoing something, and on timer, and the news came on, and when I played the video back, I was just trying to get it right to end it, and I thought, hang on, what's that? And it was a subliminal strip. Why a howitzer gun? I don't know.
Apparently they used it in the Bush-Gore presidential election as well in 2000. Whenever Gore appeared on TV, the pro-Bush channels put like subliminal pictures of pigs in a field, you know, grunting and snuffling around in the mud. Yeah, true.
Really? I thought it was illegal, actually.
It is. Well, they
but
don't
you
say
know,
about that, do they?
Lady Gaga, you notice her films is they don't allow your mind to think. I hasten to add, I don't go out of my way to watch her films. One came on accidentally, and it's just flash, 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 flash. Unbelievable. You're just sitting there, and you're sort of, and it's working on your subconscious, not your conscious.
Yeah. This is a really good segue into. Oh, sorry. I was this is a good segue into what I wanted to touch on next, which is the mind control aspect of these frequencies. Because to me, we talked about surveillance and health a little bit, but one of the bigger, the interesting points to me about wanting to have a new grid that's everywhere, I mean, literally everywhere, is about changing our environment to change us. Because all the mind control experiments done by the CIA from the 40s through the 70s that were then declassified, they used these frequencies. They used wireless frequencies in their experiments. And what they found is that, and they used other things like isolation, which is interesting, isolation, sensory deprivation, coupled with the frequencies. But what they found is that if you change the environment, you change man, you change man's minds. If you're trying to control the mind of men, you will change the environment. And so, it's already affecting us so much. I mean, these frequencies are changing people. They are causing memory loss and, what they call brain fog and also, aggression, depression and aggression. And this is provable that certain frequencies, if you target them, this is the other thing about high five is that these are it's phased array. It's a different, so you're moving to a different spectrum, which is more controllable in a sense. If you think of it like a laser beam, this is something direct that you can be used directionally. The other waves were more like waves all kind of everywhere, but you can use this directionally. So you can pinpoint. You could actually target somebody with the right frequency and cause an effect, like a specific response in terms of fear, aggression, panic. You can make somebody feel like they're not hungry if they're hungry. I mean, you could starve people and they wouldn't know it. They think that they're full all the time and they won't feel hungry. I mean, this is the level we're talking about. So this is just from frequencies. And I just want to use as an example, somebody named, I think it's Joel Delgado. Is that right, John? If I'm saying that right. If I'm remembering right, but there was Delgado, yeah, is it the 40s? I think that's correct too. He did experiments with radio frequencies and remote controlling animals. So he just needed sensors. There was a helmet. His famous experiment with a bull. He had a bull in an arena, and he was not obviously a matador himself, but he was there with a little remote control in his hand. And the bull had something on its head, like a sensor. So the bull was charging him, and he actually was able to stop the bull. Not only stop the bull in its tracks, but the bull just walked away as if it wasn't interested and just stopped completely, walked away. And so he could cause aggression or stop aggression, right? He could help, and this only required some electrodes hooked up to the brain. And so what we're we're hearing all the time now about sensors in the brain and this whole thing called brain link and linking to the cloud, so that, of course, for our benefit, right? So we can become more intelligent. And we're given this, and it's like we're told, yeah, right. And nobody thinks about the other possibility of somebody infiltrating that. I mean, right now, using the internet on our computers, you can get a so-called virus. You can, somebody can spy on you. They can infiltrate. So what do you think is going to happen when your brain is connected to that? That's not going to be a problem. I mean, I don't know who would want to sign up for that. It's incredible. But yeah, this technology is getting smaller and smaller, so that you don't need this big helmet anymore. You don't need what Delgado used on his bull. You can have something literally that you wouldn't see. And I mean, who knows if this could be implanted without our knowledge?
Shannon,
that's another topic. But the point being that.
Sorry.
What's that?
Sorry, I was just going to say.
Yeah, speak.
I don't think. Yes. I don't think there's any doubt at all that EMR radiation at the various levels that we're being exposed to now is dramatically changing us at a very basic level. Our DNA, emotions, and cognitive functions are all being radically affected and altered irrevocably, I reckon. I mean, I think the consequence of that is that we're now being, as you say, re-engineered as biological entities and remolded into an entirely new species in readiness for the next phase of our unnatural development, which is going to be the eventual merging of our bodies with machines, as you know, Shannon, because this is what we're doing, you and I, isn't it? This is what we're writing about now. And, as unbelievable as that may sound, that is exactly what's going on. And this new environment that they're creating is barely supportive of biological life forms, but it is supportive of EMR-related technologies, robots, AI, etc., etc. So much so, in fact, that the world is being totally re-engineered, not just for our future, but only for the androids that are going to follow.
Right. Yeah. So if you want to, either you get phased out or you join them, right? So either you become part robot or you're phased out. Because like you said, it's going to support them. It's not supportive to biological life. And we're seeing that all the time. We're seeing the bees and the birds and all these declines in these populations that are going to be affected first. And of course, like I was saying before, there's a trickle down effect of like our whole food production, and then us starving. So unless you're willing to have your DNA altered, to be microchipped, to have parts changed in your body, I don't know what else, and to eat lab meat, fake food, like you're not going to find a way to support yourself, especially if they cut off that access to and just not even cut off the access, but it's like, yeah, if the environment's poisoned and it's non-supportive of life, even if you have a farm, how are you going to farm? How are your animals going to survive? How is anything going to survive? So I mean, it is frightening. I mean, what the potential is there for, and the fact that there are people wanting this and pushing this and are financing this. And speaking of financing it, I mean, I just want to say there was a protest, not global, I won't use that word, worldwide. 200 countries were participating in this anti-high five, day. And it was actually January 25th of last year was the day that it was scheduled for. And that's like the day, almost to the day, that we had the news of this beer bug. I don't know if you guys have heard the code word beer bug for what's been happening, but that's because of the beer by the same name, right? Yeah. So the beer bug,
this is a gentle idea of what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah. Oh, right. Oh gosh. By the way, Louise just wrote, it's not lab meat. Louise just wrote, it's not lab meat. It's all generated from mold. So mold is the interesting part of this because they're using molds, fungus. Fungus can be used as a battery. This is I saw this in a Smithsonian magazine article like a year or two ago, that there's this new research into using molds for batteries. And so, people are getting a lot of fungal infections on their skins after the skies are sprayed. And, this seems to be coming up a lot lately with some things related to the beer bug, which makes you wonder if the Matrix movies are correct, that we are going to be used as a battery and to power the control grid that enslaves us. Which actually leads me to this other thought about the antenna systems, because with some of these jabs that people are finding, maybe that they're finding themselves to have some radioactive qualities, EMR radiating qualities. I'm wondering if something John actually wrote in his Falsification of Science. I was just rereading because there's a chapter on this, and John, you wrote that that some of these antennae could be as small as 3 millimeter by 3 millimeter for the antennas being used for high five, and so they need like hundreds of them. And now think about that for a second, how small that is, and why couldn't an antenna be implanted in us? And we could just be part of this. I mean, maybe we could become part of it. As I was saying before, like the human is going to be the central thing and the web of things. And imagine that you are not only an antenna, but you're powering your own antenna in your own control system. Now there's a thought. So the mold could be part of that. I mean, yeah.
Well, if you just
I don't know.
There's an interesting one here, Ralph.
Go back.
The Prestige 2006 film, David Bowie as Nikola Tesla. I didn't know that. The real life inventor who creates a teleportation device. Then we've got Peter. It says, we also get a lot of low tone rumbling to target certain areas, certain days, and not others. It's horrible. Though it was traffic or fans at first, but no particular cause, usually at night. That's right, Peter, yes. And then Peter's got one for you, Shannon. I think perhaps that's why they are in such a hurry to get us all. Oh, I like this to death sticked. I like that one because it makes us to better interact with frequency changes recently rolled out.
Right.
and that's and John
Absolutely.
Basinglow, and I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, John. People allow their thoughts to be controlled because they have surrendered their intellectual sovereignty over to the mainstream media, television, and pop culture. People are just intellectually lazy. I would agree with you there. And we've got one here. New World Order is real. David Bowie. There's a lot about David Bowie tonight. Talked about it in an interview on the Dick Cavett show. Dick Cavett show. I think it's America, isn't it? I don't know. Never heard of him.
Yeah.
And he described it as a noise bomb that up to the 1970s you could buy the patent for it in France for $5. Didn't know that. That's interesting. Yes, so that's quite interesting. That is. Excuse me, I'm dipping in and out of chat. I can't read everybody's comments out, so please don't take offence. There we got so many that it's impossible. So I'm just trying to, to jump around a bit. So that's quite interesting. What has just been said there. This black noise. I've heard of white noise. I've never heard of black noise before. So you just don't know what they're up to. I mean, it's all evil. I mean, what about that? What happened in England in the mid-70s, where there's some children had a day out. I think it was Oxfordshire, somewhere in the middle of England, and everybody, parents and all, started to come over sick and collapse, and they took the children to hospitals, fleets of ambulances turning up and all this, that and the other, and there's nothing wrong with them. And it's still a mystery to this day where everybody, teachers as well, were fainting and throwing up and just sort of passing out. No reason at all. It's a field in the middle of nowhere. But it was near all space. You probably wouldn't have heard of that in America, Shannon, but do you remember that, John? In the mid-70s, 76, 77, a load of children, I think it was Oxfordshire, it could be somewhere else, were in a field, it was some day out or something, and the parents and the children and the teachers, everybody started to come over sick and ill, and when they were rushed to hospital, there was nothing wrong with them. They couldn't find out what was wrong.
I don't remember that.
Have you heard of that one? It's quite famous. I think it's on YouTube.
No.
So it's popping up on YouTube. But, anyway, we are up to an hour and 22 minutes. Shall we round off now?
Okay.
Okay. Is that all right with everybody? Do you want to carry on?
Shannon, have you got anything more to say, or?
I mean, yeah, but I mean, there's so much I could say on this topic. It's a kind of, yeah, I mean, this topic's, to me, there's so many aspects and it's a long one. I mean, if I got into, maybe I'll just say quickly, I don't know if you've all heard this, but I mean, up until now, this high five has only been used in military applications as so-called non-lethal weaponry, something called ADS, or as they say, this is a funny one. I like this one. I mean, again, they always have fun with what they call things. Active denial system. Why would you call something an active denial system? Your non-lethal weapon. But it's yeah. I mean, but yeah, they could target a person. It's supposed to be used for crowd control, or maybe has been used for crowd control. You can watch videos on YouTube of actually they're demonstrating at the military, and people feel as if they are on fire, so they run away. And when you target it at them, so it has the potential of heating your skin to the point of feeling like you're on fire. In some cases, people actually develop blisters or burns. Yeah. And this is what we're supposed to be okay with. And the industry has never tested it at all for any safety effects. And I'll say the industry likes to, they won't ever say their products are safe. They just don't say that they're not. They're careful about it. So they're always calling into question studies that say they're not safe, but they never actually come out and say this is safe. This is not something that's declared because they don't want lawsuits. But again, like they've actually admitted on camera, the industry leaders, they've never tested for, in this case, have never tested for safety. And previous generations have tested for safety, but inadequately. And it's been a long time since any of those have been done. And it's only been tested for thermal effects. And I could go into that too, but that's a whole other story. So there's all kinds of biological effects besides thermal, of course. And but yeah, I guess I wanted to at least mention that. But yeah, I guess, yeah, otherwise I'm good for now.
Yeah, I know there's whenever I'm doing the show on my own, Shannon, there's always loads that I can't get in because there just isn't enough time. So yeah, I mean, obviously apologies, but I think you've done a fantastic job tonight. I think everybody will agree that you've really nailed it. Absolutely spot on. Thank you for that.
Well, you both have it. Fantastic job. There's one here. It says Sebastian Moran says, near where, Chris? Didn't pick that up. Oh, you're talking about, I guess you're talking about the children that all had a mass sort of fainting fit. I think it was near Oxford. I think it was, but please don't, keep me on that one. I know it's somewhere in the middle of England, but very, very, very odd. Well, it just leaves me, I think we've got enough material for several more shows, and it's always nice to leave the audience more.
I'd just like to say a few sentences before we end, Chris, if you don't mind. Yeah, what we've been talking, well, say we, that's the royal we. What Shannon's been talking about tonight is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, and all of this stuff is where the plug comes in. This is what we're both working on together. This is what our next joint project, our new book, which will be jointly authored by the pair of us. This is what the topic will be, and obviously, we'll go into much more detail than this, and hopefully we kind of had a quick discussion a few days ago, and we're hoping to get it out by the autumn or by the fall if you live in America. So that's right, isn't it, Shannon? That's what the plan is.
Yeah, that's the plan. And actually, I should say that's it's the first of two books, because I say in the first book we're getting into a lot of other things that we didn't cover tonight. But the second book is a little bit more on the human robot agenda.
Yeah, it's more set in the future. The next one, isn't it, about where things are going unless we manage to stop them. AI, transhumanism, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the first bit is high five and all that malarkey.
Okay, well this is
and it all links together. It all links together. It's all part of the same ongoing agenda. Agenda 21. What all this nonsense that's going on, this fear bug, somebody said. Yeah. So
fear bug.
It's all connected. Yeah, fear bug. It's all connected. All connected.
Well, this is John's website at the bottom. So if you want to have updates and what's going on and books, fantastic book. I'm still reading Behind the Curtain. Not literally behind the curtain. I'm actually reading the book, not behind the curtain. I could do it. It'd be fun for the neighbours to thinking, why is he reading that book behind the curtain? But you never know. I'm at a difficult age. And this is John's Gmail. And I don't think you've got a contact, have you, Shannon? But never mind.
I'm staying a little incognito right now, because I can't get online. That I don't spend that much time online, and I don't really have time for much any more correspondence than I have at the moment. So maybe in the future when I have more time, I'll give it out.
Again, all your comments we do read. I assure you.
Oh, great.
So please accept my apology for not reading everybody's comment out, because we're getting a lot of people in chat now. I'm pleased to see it. And they're really, really nice people. And they're really giving us a lot of material for not only this program, but for future programs as well. Now, let us try and do a little competition. Let's guess what crap from Wikipedia YouTube are going to put underneath this video when it comes on the screen. I think we can probably guess, aren't we? Because I always put some crap. And the one that we did, was it week before last, about the non-spherical Earth. That was particularly hysterical, wasn't it? Wasn't it, John? You saw that one. They gave a link to Wikipedia. So I wonder if they're going to put a link to Wikipedia this week, you know. But anyway, if anything happens, if they do give me the order of the boot and you don't, you know, I'm given a ban, please go to my website, FockhamHallRadio.com. Here it is. So all the W's. So any problems, FockhamHallRadio.com. And remember, if you go on there now, you'll see the link to where you can get an opt-out form from the NHS to stop your medical details being sold to all and sundry. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us, Shannon and John, and see us back here. Same time, same place, 8 o'clock next week, and we're hoping to do some naughty programs where we talk about naughty things that we wouldn't be allowed to talk about on this platform, but we may be able to talk about on Odyssey or BitChute. But unfortunately, we can't have live chat when we're doing it, which is a bit sad, isn't it? Because when I say naughty things, I'm not talking about rude naughty things. I'm talking about things that, shall we say, the New World Order don't want us to talk about, do they? Things like usury and stuff like that, you know, sort of go, gives them the frights. So thank you very much for joining us. Good evening, everybody. See us same time, same place.
Bye.
And remember,
Bye.
have a good laugh. Goodbye.